So let's get into your story. Let's get into your journey, right? Because you really took a non-traditional approach, right? And again, I love to share these stories because yes, our colleagues are listening, but there's also some student out there that
Mhm,
was in the same position, the same place
mhm.
where you're from, going through the same, struggles, wins, losses, whatever it may be. So I'd really like from you to kind of take it from the beginning and kind of get to where we're at now. So if you don't mind sharing your story, because I'm
Okay.
interested in learning a little bit more.
Yeah, so it all started in Colombia. Let's take it back to Colombia.
Let's go to
So
Colombia.
I come from, my dad used to own a restaurant business, and
Okay.
then my mom was a teacher. And so from a early age, I was always in the school system. Just be in the classroom, not knowing
Sure.
what's going on, but just be in the classroom. Turns out that my first week in first grade, I wanted to do everybody's homework, and so I finished. I wanted to play, so I did everyone's homework, and they noticed that, and they're like, "You can't do that." So they made me take a test, and I essentially skipped first grade and went straight to second grade, just because
Nice.
I don't know. And then I went through school regularly, but I was already advanced at that point. And so when I traveled to the States, I was 12 years old. And every single immigrant has to come through here to go to school. You have to take a test, an oral and a written test. And so to see kind of what level of knowledge you're landing at. And so when I was in the middle of eighth grade. That's when I traveled from Colombia to Miami.
Okay.
And my knowledge level was a 10th grade level, but I was in the middle of eighth grade. My English wasn't there. So they offered me the opportunity to go straight to 10th grade and just learn the language.
Okay.
um, my mom was being a teacher, super excited for me, and she wanted me to absolutely do it, but she forgot the fact that I was 12 years old. And so my dad, on the other hand, was like, let's just talk about this at home, let her process. It's a new culture, it's a new country, a new
Mhm.
language. And now you're putting this little girl, 12-year-old, into 10th grade. Let's just like process this. So
Yeah.
when I got home, he told me, it's up to you. We're not going to get mad at you. Whatever you want to do, you do. And so I thought about it. And in my mind, silly me, I really thought that the United States school system was like the movies Mean Girls. And
Oh
so I
my.
was terrified. I was like, oh my God, no. So I decided to stay in eighth grade and just learn the language. So what I would do is I would look at the clock, and every 45 minutes, so 45 minutes of the classroom, I would study English, and 15 minutes of the classroom, I would do the homework that everybody was supposed to do during that time. Right. So that's
Ah,
kind of how I did my schooling. And I really wanted to learn. You cannot do honor classes unless you have the language down. And I really
right.
wanted to be in honors. So I studied as much as I could. I actually got like a special test during summer, because you're not supposed to get out of the ESO language during summer. You're supposed to finish the year. And I took the test. They passed me. I was able to be with the regular people. That's what I call them. And I finished high school. In high school, in 10th grade, they also offered me to do the dual program. And I said, to go to college. And I really wanted to have that experience, that high school experience, being that I was already so young. Everybody was 3 years older than me.
Right.
I wanted to kind of stay and soak it in. And then I realized it was not like Mean Girls. So I decided to stay and just, enjoy high school. And I did. I did everything that is high school related, the good and the bad. I did it all. And I was
Yeah.
very happy that I was able to at least enjoy that, being that I was still the youngest. I graduated the youngest out of my entire high school. I was 16 years old. I had just turned 16 and we
Wow.
graduated. Yeah. And so, it was great. But with all of those highlights, it still comes the down parts, right?
Yeah.
Which it was a lot to handle, especially during senior year, because that's kind of when you start selecting your colleges and where you want to go. And I was a very, very good student. And so I had scholarships. Comes to find out that because of my immigration status at the time, I was not able to accept the scholarships
Oh no.
yeah, that was being offered to me. So imagine putting all that effort, having that great GPA, doing
Right.
everything right, and coming your last year of senior, because that's not something that I talked to my parents about. It's not something that we discussed, right? I knew that
Right.
we were going through legal proceedings, but I just didn't know exactly what it entailed.
Right.
And so it was when I got the scholarship offers and I got home super excited. I was like, oh my God, I qualify. And they had to kind of break it down to me like, we're so sorry, but you can't do this. And I was just like,
Wow.
so,
It's like they pulled the rug from underneath your feet. I mean, and especially just thinking at that age,
mhm.
like just the emotional roller coaster you might have been on, right?
Yeah, like
Um,
I kept looking at the other requirements. I used to play sports. I mean, you name it, I had it. My GPA was impeccable. My classes, my grades, I was advanced. I was taking honors. Like everything was perfect, right?
yeah,
And so I learned the harsh truth literally senior year. And so I said, okay, everything happens for a reason. God has a plan. That's
amen to
fine.
that. Yeah.
And so I was 16. My little sister was also just born. So I said, you know what, it's fine. Like I'll just stay a year out of school. Like I'm young, it's okay. And so I did. And then I enrolled into a local community college called Miami Dade in here in Miami. But the tricky part about that was that because I still didn't have this proper status, my parents had to pay 3 times the amount of my tuition.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so being, that's also another hardship. So I was like, oh my God, here we go. And so I made a deal with my dad and I told him, listen, I will work at the local mall and earn pennies, literally, as long as you pay for my tuition and I'll pay for my books. Because back then we didn't have the luxury of ebooks. It was your textbooks that are like 800 pounds, right? And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what we did. We made a deal, and if I was to ever get a bad grade, I had to pay him the amount of money that he invested into my schooling. So that's kind of what we did. So from very early on, I learned responsibility and I learned that I had to work hard for whatever I wanted to accomplish in life. And I have always wanted to be someone and, kind of, I always had this dream of making my parents' sacrifices worth their time, right? So
Yeah.
we did that. I finished my first 2 years, which ended up being like 2 years and a half because my parents couldn't afford the full semester. And so after that, I said, you know what, it's okay, let's take a break. And so I did, and it was during that time. It was actually towards the end of my first 2 years of undergrad, my community college, that my brother thought that his contact lens was like floating in the back of his eye because he fell asleep with them.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
And so I took him, and I was taking anatomy at the time. So I took him to an eye doctor nearby who turned out to be my mentor.
Okay.
And I saw how he went super concerned and walked out so happy that, for the most part, that there was no contact lens in the back of his eye, which I had told him, by the way. I told him that it was not anatomically possible, but he said that I didn't know anything and that we need to go to the doctor. So, of course. But it was a great experience to the point that I asked her if I could shadow her. And she said, absolutely, come Monday morning, 9 o'clock. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, I was there with my little notebook. Luckily, her office was so close to the community college that I would go back and forth between classes.
Nice.
And I ended up that week, I fell in love with optometry. I was completely obsessed with the profession.
Yeah.
And so I knew that this is exactly what I wanted to do, right? And
Yeah.
so I did that I shadowed her for like 2 years, but during that time, I was able to I started working in the eye care field. Like I think my first job was honestly made up. It was like by the office. The office saw me there so frequently that they made up a job for me. They literally said,
Right,
"You be the
right.
technician," and I used to just read with the lensometer, the glasses, and like take an AR, and that was it. That was my job. I was so happy. I was like, of course, I'm doing optometry.
Yeah.
And I did that. And then I ended up I went to the mall and then I asked if I could just work like a seasonal job at like one of those, we used to call it Optical World. And I
Yeah.
learned a little bit about insurance, I learned a little bit about glasses. And then I worked at an office then as a front desk, and then I learned a little bit about the optical. So when the opticians were out to lunch or whatever, I'll fix glasses and like fit
Yeah.
glasses. And then I ended up becoming a scribe. So like little by little, I started to build kind of all that experience.
Yeah.
And but still with the goal of when the time was right, when I was gonna go back to school and
Yeah.
do it. And so everything worked out. And one day I said, you know what? I need to go back to school. And this time I could. And so I went and I enrolled in Florida International University.
Okay.
And I remember that I had already been out of school for, I think it was close to 4 years. So I was
Wow.
cutting it close,
Yeah.
yeah, to to register in my classes that I had taken previously count towards my degree. And I asked if I could take 5 classes that semester. And they looked at me like I was crazy. They said no. They're like, no, if you want to, you need to talk to your advisor. So I did. I went and talked to my advisor, and they were like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. And I was like, yes, we are. So they're like, you need to talk to, I don't know if you know this, but I take no for an answer. So I was like, I'm super determined. So they're like, you need to get an override by your professor if you really want this to happen. I highly advise you not to do it. You haven't been in school in a long time. This is different. I needed all my sciences classes. So I was like, okay. I went, and they're like, don't do it. You also have a full-time job. And I was like, okay. So I went and got the override against everybody's advice.
Right.
It turns out that I made Dean's list that semester. So I
Wow.
went back for more. I was like, here's my Dean's list, here are my grades. I'm also maintaining a full-time job. Give me
Yeah.
more classes. And so that's kind of how I continued my schooling. And then I
Yeah.
finished my undergrad. And I had my regular gap year, as everybody has their gap year, to go through optometry school. By then, I already had so much experience. I think I had maybe like
Oh
6 years
yeah.
of experience in the field. I mean, I had
Yeah.
done it all. I had done it from lab to optician to front desk to managing to
Yeah.
scribe. So I was just like, okay, I'm ready to be the doctor. And
Yeah.
so I took my OIT. I presented everything that I had to present. My number one dream school was Nova. Um, and I applied. I think it was like five. I heard back from like three in Nova, nothing, and I was like, oh my god. By
Oh
the
man.
way, during that gap year, those gap years, because it was like four, I
Right.
purchased a home in Miami, and so I wanted to stay in Miami. I
I'm
was like,
trying
I
to
need to
figure out
stay.
how you can stay sane with all the things you had cooking up. I mean, like you're just here, here, here. But the thing is, you're executing at a high level on every single thing, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just blown away by just the
So
success and wins all throughout this entire journey.
I am a very determined person, and something that I have always kept in my mind is
Mhm.
all the sacrifice that my parents have put
Yeah.
into at everything that I am today. And I needed to, I always had that drive and that fire within me to
Yeah.
continue to be a better person, to continue to pursue my dreams and my goals. I'm also the oldest out of three. So I wanted to be the example, I wanted to lead them so that they
Yeah.
can have a role model essentially to say, hey, you know what? Like, she could do it, I could do it too. Mind you, my parents didn't do any schooling here in the United States. So this was
Yeah.
all me figuring out by myself. I had
Yeah.
nobody to help me. Like,
Yeah.
this is how you do college. No, it was just
Yeah.
Google and me. And I was like, this is what I'm gonna do and figuring things out. But it was always that. It's always, and that's a drive that it's always every single no that I got throughout my entire process, because there were a
Yeah.
lot, right? And a lot of downs. I always told myself this is just an opportunity for my yes. I need to get the
Love
next
it.
no so that I can get my yes. And
Right.
eventually I'll get my yes. It wasn't one of those that somebody closes the door on me and I'm going to just automatically be defeated and say
Right.
and feel bad for myself and feel sorry for myself. I don't believe in that victim mentality at all.
Yeah.
I'm a go getter. I am very disciplined. And I said, you know what? This is my goals. And maybe right now it's not the time. Maybe God has better plans for me. I always left it as to this is not a no. This is
Yeah.
just, it's not the right time
It's
right
not the
now.
season. It's not the season
Yeah.
for it, right? But at
Yeah.
some point in time, it'll
At
come.
some point in time, it's going to work
Yeah.
out for me.
What's up, esteemed colleagues? If you like this short highlight, there's more where that came from. Dive into the full episode right here. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell for our latest updates. Make it happen, Captain. We definitely want you to tune in. Your support fuels our passion. See you in the next highlight.